All right. Good morning. My name is Kaitlin Wildoner. I am a Florida Bar attorney with my main office in St. Johns County, Florida. And Social Security is a federal practice area, so I can assist clients in all 50 states. Today, we are going to talk about the Form SSA 3369, also known as the Work History Report. This is a form that Social Security often sends at the beginning stages of a claim to give them an opportunity to better understand your work history. So again, today we are going to talk about the Form SSA 3369, the Work History Report. We're going to talk about how Social Security uses Form SSA 3369. We're going to talk about what is Social Security looking for in that completed work history report. And finally, how can an attorney help you with your disability claim? So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Kaitlin Wildoner. I am the founding attorney of Beacon Disability, PLLC. Beacon Disability exclusively practices federal administrative Social Security disability law, and we can assist clients in all 50 states with respect to their SSDI and SSI matters at the agency level. So not federal district court, but just at the agency level, from the initial application that you file with Social Security all the way through the appeals council. We can help with those if you've got questions. All right, so first, before we get into the work history report form, I want to talk about the 5-step evaluation process that Social Security uses when evaluating a disability case. First of all, they start with looking at, are you currently engaging in what they call substantial gainful activity? Substantial gainful activity is working more than 20 hours a week, or for 2022, earning more than $1,350 a month gross. So that's $1,350 a month gross receipts prior to any taxes taken out, health insurance, any other deductions you've got. If you're working more than 20 hours a week, or you're earning more than $1,350 in gross income a month, Social Security will look at that step one. They'll say, you're engaging in substantial gainful activity. The claim stops there. They don't even get to analyze your medical benefits. They just strictly stop there because you're engaging in substantial gainful activity. So therefore, according to their own definitions, you cannot be found disabled. If you are not engaging in substantial gainful activity, they go to that second step and they look to see on the medical records, do you have any severe medically determinable impairments? That they'll look through your medical records to determine if you've got one or more conditions that are severe, that provide significant limitations in your activities of daily living. If you don't have any severe medically determinable impairments, the analysis stops there. They don't get any further. They'll issue their denial. If you do have severe medically determinable impairments, they make a note of what they are and they move to next step, which is step 3, to see, do you meet or equal one of their listings? They have a handful of listings, well, more than a handful, actually. They've got a handful of listings in a handful of different body parts, including your musculoskeletal system, the immune system, different things like that. They have specific listings for each of those that they will compare your condition to those listings. If you meet or equal a listing, then that's where the analysis stops. But this time, instead of a denial, you'll get a favorable decision. If you don't meet or equal a listing, Social Security kind of moves to like a half step, and they will assess your residual functional capacity, which is what they believe, based on the medical records, you're capable of doing, whether it's sedentary work, which is mostly sitting and hardly any lifting, light work, which is a mix of sit and stand jobs with a little bit of lifting, medium work, heavy, very heavy. They kind of combine all of that into a residual functional capacity evaluation. They do also take into account mental limitations. And then at step 4, they use that residual functional capacity, also known as an RFC. They use that to determine, can you return to your past work? And now that's where we come into play with that work history report. If you can go back to your past work, you're found not disabled, Social Security will issue their denial and you can appeal it. If you cannot go back to your past work, then Social Security goes to step 5 and they say, all right, can you engage in any other work? And at that stage, they'll look into your age, your education, and again, your past work to determine if you have any skills that might be transferable to other jobs. So as you can see, the work history report is actually a very important part of the disability claim. So you'll want to make sure it's filled out correctly. When you submitted your initial application for SSDI or SSI benefits, you might remember giving Social Security this information. They asked for your work history for the past 15 years, including the job title, the company or the industry that you worked in, the date that you started, and the date that you stopped. They also will ask for information about your education as well. This kind of lays the foundation for that work history report. Sometimes if Social Security thinks that you gave enough information in the application about your work history, they won't ask you to fill this out. However, most of the time, claimants 50 and older will get a copy of this because at that point, it's important for Social Security to truly understand what your past work consisted of, what your responsibilities were, what you did on a daily basis. So this is important. All right. So, and I apologize, I have my printed notes to make sure I hit all the high points. I couldn't figure out how to do it on the computer this morning. So here we are. This is what the work history report looks like. You'll first, as you can see, put at the top, you'll put your name, your social, and your daytime telephone number. Then in section 2 is where it gets into your work history. You'll want to put your job title. You can put the type of business that it was. Sometimes I've seen people put, warehouse, and some people will put Amazon warehouse. Either way, it's important to give a little bit more background as to what you did. If your job title was a warehouse worker, kind of keeping with that theme, and you put type of business warehouse, that gives us a little bit of an idea. But if you can put Amazon warehouse, that gives us an even better idea. And then of course the dates worked. I always say you want to be as specific as you can. If you know the exact date you started and stopped, excellent, put those in. If all you can do is kind of estimate the month, it was January of 2015, then you can put that in there. If all you can do is do this season, was it cold? Was it hot? Was it, was Christmas coming up? Had Christmas just passed? Birthday, was it near your birthday? Kind of try to remember big events that happen throughout the year and see if you can peg it to a time close in there to get it as close as possible. Because what Social Security is trying to understand from that perspective is how long you did it. If you say you did it from 2009 to 2010, that seems like it may have been as wide of a span as 2 years, but it also could have been as short of a span as 2 months if you started in December of 2009 and you stopped in January of 2010. So try to get as specific as possible because that is an important piece as well. All right. The other thing is under type of business. Let's say you were a chef. That's your past work. So you've got job title was just chef. Was it in a country club? Was it in a hotel? Was it in a fine dining restaurant? Was it at a fast food restaurant? If you were a cashier, was it at a wholesale store? Was it at, a Walmart? Was it at a jewelry store? That kind of gives Social Security an idea too as to what those job requirements were just based on that alone. Nursing is another one. Were you in a hospital? Were you in the OR? Were you on a floor? Were you a school nurse? Were you in a doctor's office in private practice? What type of business were you in? So that's what they're looking at. The timeline too, if you've got pay stubs, if you've got tax forms, those can sometimes be helpful. If you do have a resume, not everybody has a resume. If you do, take a look at that. That can kind of give you a really good basis of how to fill out this work history report. So those can all be helpful. Next, we get into the job specifics. Try to complete this as accurately and completely as possible because this is where Social Security really looks at to classify that past work. You'll put at the top the rate of pay. Were you paid by the hour? Were you paid a set amount per day? Were you paid a set amount per week? Were you salaried? So you'll want to put that in there. And then you'll see hours per day and days per week. I know sometimes with certain jobs, taking a cashier as an example, you may not work the same schedule every single week. If you work for, again, I'm in Northeast Florida, so we've got Publix here. If you have a Publix, you know how excellent they are, but you don't always have the same schedule. Now, granted, when I go, most of the same people are working every week, so I assume they have somewhat of a similar schedule every week, but I also used to work at Publix, so I know you don't have the same hours every single week, at least at my store. Maybe they do at others. So you'll want to kind of do an average. If you work 30 hours a week and they've got you on 5 days, that's going to be 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. If some weeks you work 4 days for 7 hours, that still kind of gets you in that range. So if you don't have a set schedule where you show up every single day at 9 and you leave every single day at 5, but instead it shifts a little bit, kind of try to do an average, okay? And you can certainly notate too, right above that where it's got hours per day and days per week, you could put this as an average. I didn't have the same schedule every week, to kind of let them know that, you didn't show up every day at 9 a.m. Some days they would start you at 9, some days they would start you at 1, some days they would not have you on at all. It varied. And I'm assuming too, especially in a cashier position, that you might work, if you normally work 30, they may have you working 35 hours during the time from, mid-November through the end of the year to get through the holidays. And you can make a notation of that as well. You'll see on the last page, there's a spot for comments. So if you've got comments like that you want to add, you can absolutely do that. So underneath the rate of pay and the hours is the job description. What did you do all day? What were you responsible for? Again, kind of think in the law of averages. So in a typical day, what did you do? Now, of course, if you had, sticking with the cashier example, if you were sometimes when the store is slow, and again, it's because I know this from personal experience, they would have you do, I think they would call them go backs. So you would have to, there would be a card of people, that came up to the store and they said, oh, actually, I don't want that. And so then it would go in a cart. And every day, a couple of times a day, that cart would have to then be distributed back amongst the store. So you were a cashier for 7 hours of the day, but the last hour you were putting go backs back on the shelf. Or I know, again, from personal experience, sometimes they would have the cashiers and baggers kind of not stock shelves, but push everything up to the front as the day went on and people kept grabbing stuff off the shelf. So that way customers don't have to reach all the way to the back of the shelf to grab their can of soup. It's right in front. So if that was something else that you did, just think, you don't have to fill this form out the second you get it and, write it out right away. No, it's okay to take a day to think about, what did I do all day? And to kind of synthesize that and summarize it. Again, if you need more space, you can add it to the remarks section. Just make sure on that remarks section that you're saying which job you're continuing. So keeping with that cashier example, what did you do all day? You were responsible for checking customers out of the grocery store. That meant that you were standing all day. And that meant that, your arms were constantly moving from here to get the stuff on the conveyor belt over to here to push it down to the bagger. You were having to bag groceries yourselves. I know that often happens, especially during busy hours. They don't necessarily have on schedule a bagger for every register. And even when they do, the baggers take the groceries out to the car. So you're going to have some time where you do have to do that. Kind of just think about those types of things. Were you responsible for pushing the water across? I know another thing that doesn't happen all the time, but at Publix they have, I'm not sure, big bags of salt. And I grew up in South Florida, and that's when I worked at Publix. And so people would sometimes use salt for their pools. I don't have a salt pool. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do or not, but that's what they said they were doing with it. So I take them at their word. So what did you do all day? All right, so you can go ahead and summarize. Like I said, if you need more space, that last page on the remarks section you can use. And as we'll talk about later, if you need even more space, you can add your own pages. There's nothing in the Social Security regulations that say that you have to only use their paper they send you. You can use your own paper. Start with this, but if you have more, you can use your own paper. All right, so then it goes to, in this job, did you use any machines, tools, equipment? Did you have to use any technical knowledge or skills? Did you do any writing, completing any reports, doing anything like that? All right. You can make a note of what those things were if you would like, or you can just simply respond yes or no. This next part can kind of get tricky. In this job, how many total hours a day did you walk, stand, sit, climb, stoop, kneel, crouch, crawl, handle, grab, or grasp big objects? How many hours did you reach? And how many hours did you write, type, or handle small objects? So the important piece here is those first 2, 4, 6, 8, from walking down to stooping, so that first whole column, and then kneeling down to crawling, that second column, those first 3, those total hours that you put for all of that should add up to however many hours a day you worked. So if you work 6 hours a day, those 6 should total those 8 should total 6 hours. So you can do it in hour increments. Sometimes it's easier to do in half-hour increments. You know, if you were responsible, again, cashiering for 6 hours a day, you would stand for 5.5, and the other half was spent walking, or the other half was spent kind of kneeling or crouching when you were doing, I don't even know what it's called anymore, but, you know, pulling the stuff up to the front of the shelves. You would have to kneel down sometimes to get to the bottom shelf. So those you'll want to total up to however many hours a day you worked. Handling, grasping, grabbing, reaching, writing, those you can do while you're doing the other posturals. So those can kind of be added on in addition to, you know, if you were responsible for, you know, if you were a nurse, let's say, and you were working 12-hour days, you would be walking for 2 hours a day, standing for, I said 12 hours. So standing for, now y'all are making me do math, standing for 9 hours, and then the last hour you would be sitting. But you would be writing, typing, or handling small objects, doing your reports. So sometimes you'd be standing. So sometimes that would overlap with the stand time. Sometimes it's going to overlap with the sit time. So it's okay to kind of take those last 3 and add on hours almost, but it's not added. It's just you're doing it while you're in those other postural states. I hope that makes sense. And then lifting and carrying. What did you lift? How far would you have to lift it and carry it? How much did it weigh? So that's the important thing that Social Security is trying to understand and classify that past work. Taking the nursing example, if you were a floor nurse and you needed to lift your patients from one bed to the next on a pretty regular basis, you would include that you would have to lift a patient from one bed to the next. You know, and of course, if you had help with that, you can make a notation of that as well. You know, grocery. You would have to lift and carry 24-pack of water. You would have to lift and carry a gallon of milk. You would have to lift and carry, again, those salt packs. I don't think I ever touched one, but I'm sure some cashiers did and do. Bundles of wood, you know, different things like that. So how often you did it, how much it weighed, how far you carried it. The heaviest weight lifted is the heaviest weight you ever lifted in that job. Even if you just did it once, what's the heaviest weight you ever lifted? And then the weight that you frequently lifted is the weight that you lifted most often throughout the day. All right, let's see. All right, here we've got job specifics continued. This part is the bottom of that same page, and it's about supervising. It's trying to understand kind of what your mental load of the job was. Were you responsible for supervising others? If yes, then you'll want to put down how many people did you supervise, what percent of the time was spent supervising those people, and did you have the ability to hire and fire? If you did not supervise other people, then Social Security wants to know, were you a lead worker? Were you a head cashier? Were you a head nurse? Oftentimes the head nurses, in my experience anyways, do supervise other people, but sometimes maybe they don't. And again, if you are responsible for supervising others and their work product kind of comes back on you, you make sure that Social Security knows that. All right, so you will need to fill out one of these job specific sheets, which this is the bulk of the page, and then this is the second quarter, I guess. You need to fill one of these out for every job that you had listed on page 1. So there are only, I believe, 6 of these pages added to the packet that they send out. So again, if you fill this out and you've got 10 jobs or even more, then you will need to supplement with your own paper explaining all of this that you find on these pages. So you need to explain all of that for all of your jobs. Okay. All right, let's see. Yes, we always make sure we include all information about past work. Okay. How does Social Security use that work history report? So as I keep kind of talking about, they use it to define your past work. They use it to understand what you did in your work life before you became disabled. They will compare your jobs to the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. And at stage 4, they will compare it to your given residual functional capacity to see if you can go back to your past work based on the RFC they've given you. If you are over age 50, they may use your past work to evaluate your case under a grid rule. And the grid rules we will talk about in a different webinar, but basically they kind of have differences based on your age. Everybody 49 and under follows the same grid rule. They're not really impacted by the grid rules. 50 to 54 may be impacted by the grid rules depending on what your past work was and depending on what your RFC is. 55 to 59, those are generally impacted by the grid rules, but it depends on what your past work was and what your RFC is. 60 and up is the same thing. They're also generally impacted. So the grid rules change every 5 years in age, 50, 55, and 60. So what is Social Security looking for in a completed work history report? As I've alluded to, it's got to be completely filled out. You have got to list all of your jobs. You do not have to, if you get this on a Monday, you don't have to sit down. If you go check the mail at 2 o'clock, you don't have to sit down at 2:15 with this and complete it in 5 minutes. That's not the goal. The goal is, especially if you're 50 and up, the goal is to truly get Social Security to understand what your past work was, what your job responsibilities were, so they can properly classify your past work when evaluating your case. Completing it requires an accurate description of your past work. So again, you don't have to fill it out in 5 minutes. Think about it. If you get it at 2 p.m. on a Monday, it's okay to think about it all Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning and sit down Tuesday and do it, okay? You'll want an accurate statement of the physical demands of that job. And you'll want an accurate statement of how much time you spent supervising others. Anytime you're dealing with Social Security, accuracy is the name of the game. You don't want to overstate, you don't want to understate. It's important to be honest and accurate. All right, so finally, the last thing we can talk about is how can an attorney help you? So while we cannot be in your brains and we do not know what your past work required of you, we can kind of guess. So I keep talking about cashiers and nurses. There's obviously many more jobs that exist out there that I have seen, that other attorneys have seen. So we can kind of take a look at the work history report, especially for claimants 50 and 55 and up, to see, have you forgotten major responsibilities? Or did you not have to do that? And so then it is accurate and complete. So we review your documents for accuracy and completeness. We cannot fill them out for you because we are not in your brain. We can help you fill them out and we can help review them, again, for accuracy and completeness. We will also discuss with you what Social Security is looking for in their requested forms, kind of like how I just did just now about the work history report. Every form that Social Security sends, we discuss to kind of give you an idea of what is Social Security looking for? What's the purpose of this form? What are they trying to do? What is your angle in filling it out to make sure you complete it accurately, completely, honestly, and give them what they're looking for so they can make a good determination on your claim. An attorney will also work with you to provide relevant updates to Social Security throughout your claim. That means, of course, that you need to keep us updated. As long as you keep us updated, we keep Social Security updated and keep those lines of communication open. It can be incredibly frustrating. If you've ever tried to deal with Social Security, you know, it can be incredibly frustrating to get somebody to call you back. We don't have a magic wand that can have them make us call them back, but we do have different tactics that we use to make sure things get into your file. We will also, kind of in line with the second one, we provide guidance on what correspondence from Social Security actually means. Oftentimes we'll get calls from clients that are freaked out because they got this letter asking for more information and they're like, oh my gosh, Social Security doesn't have this. No, they do. They just want more. So, providing guidance on what that correspondence means, kind of talking you off a ledge sometimes is what it comes down to. An attorney will file any necessary appeals. Anytime there's a denial, you and your attorney should discuss it to see if it's something that should be appealed and something that can be appealed. The attorney will also review your medical records and discuss them with you. This is a big one. I often have clients that tell me, oh yeah, my doctor knows about this. They put it in the file that said that, I can only work 4 hours a day because of this, that, and the other thing. Well, I get the medical records and it's not in there. So it's important to have the attorney reviewing the files and discussing it with you to make sure that what you think is in the record is in the record. The other thing an attorney is good for is preparing you for an administrative law judge hearing. With the hearing, you are the primary witness most of the time. The purpose of the hearing is to kind of give you an opportunity to explain to Social Security what your day-to-day functioning is, what limitations you've got. They should have the medical records, which an attorney can also help you get. But preparing for that hearing, it can be nerve-wracking. So that's something that an attorney is good for as well. And during that hearing, an attorney is good for questioning you and any witnesses. Depending on the judge, depending on the locale, you may or may not have your own personal witnesses, but there is almost always a vocational witness at the hearing, and sometimes there's a medical witness at the hearing. And those are individuals that Social Security has brought on to testify in your case. They are not testifying against you per se, but having an attorney there who understands the process can help kind of clarify any holes that are there in their testimony, or solicit more testimony that can be helpful to you that the judge maybe didn't do. All right, so I sincerely appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for sticking around with me. Thank you for the patience and looking down at my notes every now and then, since I couldn't get my technology to quite work the way I wanted it to this morning. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call, send us an email. Again, Beacon Disability, we help clients exclusively in the agency part of the Social Security Administration. So we are able to assist clients throughout the United States. Our main office is in beautiful St. Johns County, Florida. If you've got questions, feel free to give us a call, reach out. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you next time.